What's new? What's new? No, how is the world treating you? That's the next line. Yes.
Like the definition of Greek is kind of, or at least people are like considering themselves Greek, even if like, or like adopting Greek culture, even if they're not, like the Phoenician little deity in the
Tanit.
Yeah, in the Greek house, but then like, isn't there deities riding the dolphins?
There are erotes. So Eros is a kind of baby deity. There are erotes riding the dolphins, and each of the erotes are holding the symbol of a big deal deity. So one is holding a trident, one is holding a thunderbolt, one is holding a thyrsos for Dionysus, and the last is holding a club for Heracles. So, yes. So the dolphin riders in here are only understandable if you know about the Greek pantheon and can recognize the symbols, because the gods themselves aren't actually portrayed. Their symbols are portrayed. So you have to know a lot to get it. So absolutely. So say again or rephrase the idea of Greek is bigger? No, yes.
Well, I think people are just starting to consider themselves more Greek, like they know where they come from. They're starting to adopt Greek.
So people are. This is a great phrase that a colleague of mine came up with. There, you can see in the Hellenistic period people adopting nested identities. So one identity inside another. So this person is proclaiming an ethnic identity and a cultural identity, and they aren't the same. And because they aren't the same, you have to be careful to identify them both. You have to specify. What else? So, a more realistic depiction, is that what you said? Meaning, so compare that.
A humanization of their enemies.
So they're real. The enemy is now real. The enemy isn't at a remove in that fantasy world of myth. The enemy is real, and he's recognizable. He's specific, too. The thing about couching the identity of your enemy in mythological terms is it's ever adaptable to changing circumstance. And that's good and it's bad. It's good in that it gives the feel of battle a kind of cosmic timelessness. When you look at the Centauromachy metopes on the Parthenon, that could be any struggle between civilization and barbarism. When you look at the Dying Gaul, there's only one battle that can be. But then you know who the enemy is. You can specify him. What else?
I guess greater, I don't want to say immersion with the art and sculpture, like this one sculpture of the dying god. In that place, it didn't just have the dying god, it had dying Persians and dying Hamzat. They were all right in front of you.
Your point is absolutely correct. The sculptural group that you are referring to with all of the dead bodies that's the lesser Attalid dedication, and that's the one that's on the Acropolis, on the south wall of the Acropolis, just behind the Parthenon, overlooking the Theater of Dionysus. That's the one with the huge group with all the dead figures. And this particular dying enemy, the one that's on here, this Dangal, is from the dedication, the memorial that's inside the Sanctuary of Athena at Pergamon. So there are two Attalid dedications.
Okay.
But your basic point is absolutely well taken, that there is an attempt to force the viewer to be immersed in the experience. The experience comes down to the level of the viewer and draws the viewer in, as opposed to being at a remove up on a building inside the border of a pediment or metopes or frieze. Yep. I just need to turn down the volume on the mic. No, that's not what I want to do. Oh yeah, that's what I want to do. You need to go down. Thank you. And now you need to go away. How do you do that? How do I make it go away? That will make it go away? That's good. Good to have help. All right. What else? That didn't seem to help. I don't know. My clothes? Oh, is that the problem? Think that'll be better? All right. I thought I needed to get it further away from my mouth. Okay, what else? All right, what's the same? If, as our first commentator pointed out, we can have a cultural Greek identity, even if we are clear that we are not Greek, what is that identity? How does one adopt a Greek cultural identity?
Well, one, not really pictured in these ones, but like a lot of the places showing the Pan-Ethnic Emperor, that's in places that aren't Greek, or are Greek, but aren't in Greece. And like in the tomb that painted on the wall of Pan-Ethnic Emperor, people saying, yeah, I was there, or possibly I participated in it, but this is what I want you guys to get Greek. I like it.
Yeah, so we've seen that twice. One is the painted tomb at Marsa, which we're going to go to again in just a few moments. And that is clearly not in Greece. The second place we saw it was on Delos, in the house of the Trident. And when we first saw it, you probably all assumed, and why not, that the person who lived there was Greek. I mean, Delos is an island in the Greek world. It's in the Greek Aegean. Everything in the house looks Greek. But now that you know that just down the street from the house of the Trident is the house of the Dolphins, and this person has made very clear that they're not Greek, and you know that there are plenty of non-Greeks living and doing business on the island of Delos, actually there's no assumption, it's not safe at all to assume that the person who lived in the house of the Trident was Greek. And on the evidence of seeing a Pan-Athenaic amphora depicted in those tombs in Marsa, what you really can say is that all you can really know is that that person is adopting or at least admiring this aspect of Greek culture and associating himself with it. So borrowing the gods, borrowing Athenian festivals, Athenian celebrations. What else? What makes for Greek identity in this era? I love it how everybody studiously looks down at their paper. What makes for Greek identity? So showing off, public display, and examples would be the mosaics, or what else? This guy. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What else? Or his hoped for. Right, exactly. This, what in essence is the difference between this and a kouros from the archaic era? Well, I mean, of course, the obvious difference is that he's got his own head, he's got his own face, right? But other than that, he's completely buying into the idea. The poem that you read of, which one was it who just thought it was terrible to grow old? Was that Callinus? That's what this guy is. It's as if you read the poem.
That goes along, doesn't it, with the individual honor and recognition, which we see here, like in the seal, in this guy's portrait, he's much more of an individual, and yet he's being honored or recognized. So.
Yeah, absolutely. In the idea of individuals garnering recognition, garnering honor, that this is the only thing that you can really hope for as a mortal on this earth. To have success and hear it proclaimed widely. That's 500 years old now, but it still counts. What else?
Borrowing from the Peripheros or from the Exileo stele or the Geso stele or from Parthenon, that you're in touch with that artistic tradition enough to appropriate it.
You're in touch with that artistic tradition enough to appropriate it for your own use. So you all remember the beautiful Hegesos stele, the grave stele from Athens, late 5th century BCE. The lady on this little ceiling, of course, we don't know whose ceilings these are, but I think probably just about anybody that this must have belonged to a lady. And that's the guys. The Doryphoros. This is the pose, Alexander on his horse on the Alexander sarcophagus, is the pose of the Dexileo stele, itself a quote from the Parthenon frieze. This a quote from the west pediment of the Parthenon, Athena on the great altar. Subject, drapery, pose. So it's not just, so in the case of the mosaic of the dolphins, you need to know the stories. You need to know the links between gods and their tokens. But in these other cases, the power of these, or the dying Gaul and the agate pediments, you, in order to really get it, that artist, the person who conceived it, had a very noble, long tradition in mind, and that tradition is Greek. So it all gets stitched together. What else? You have your old sheets. take a look at some of the ideas that you had from those. Big. Love of big, monumental. Absolutely. The Great Altar is not misnamed. It is great. It is huge. It's huge. Bigger is always better. What else? Horse. Horse. That's one of the ways you recognize a hero. Guy on a horse. What else?
We haven't seen really anybody on pots lately.
We haven't seen anybody on pots because they stopped in the Greek East painting people on pottery. Pottery is no longer a vehicle for, what were the pots a vehicle for? Storytelling. We have evidence up here for storytelling?
With Alexander, didn't he have somebody documenting all of his travels and stuff, though? So isn't that kind of like storytelling?
So what's happening to all these great stories? What's happening to the idea of storytelling in this era? Think about all those Greek pots and pedimental sculptures and metope series. Chris?
They're actually real stories now. They're not myths.
Real stories are starting to crowd out legendary stories. What quote does that go with? Look on your sheets. That one. What do you see down there, Caridimus? Darkness of Hades, a lie. And what else?
Is it the Epictetus one where he talks about how dumb everybody in the area was?
Right. I mean, if that's your story, why, you need new stories. That is no longer a good story. Or a story to work, it has to be a good story. Heroes you can believe in. Ideals you can follow. Alexander is crowding out, and other larger-than-life real figures. Where have stories migrated to? Look up there, or at your sheets.
Into those houses, they into huts. They transferred to kind of allow people to those events.
So the stories are in mosaics, for example. Sometimes they're not even real stories. So the pseudo chariot race is a kind of an event, but it's not a recognizable specific story.
It seems like the legendary mythological storytelling has moved to private display, and the real life moved to public display. That's what's become more important. And if you want to talk about myths, that's fine. Just do it at your house. So,
Yeah, that's perfect. Those stories, the things that linked people together, that gave you a common frame of cultural reference, that allowed you to feel connected with other people. Everybody knows the story of Achilles. Everybody knows the story of Heracles. Everybody knows about Zeus and his various comportings around. And now, you like that story? Here, you can have it. You can have it on your own little personal seal. You like the story of Ambrosia, for example, That's one of the mosaics in House on Delos. Pollitt talks about that one in his book, and he's got a picture. That's fine. These are denuded of power and turned into entertainment. Now, if you want an illustration, an inspiration on a public stage, it's real life. Okay, we could keep going, but we are not going to keep going. But I think you get the idea. All right, let's go back quickly before we leave the east and move west to Marissa, down in the southern part of modern-day Israel on the Levantine coast in the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE, when it was a town in an inland region of this inland region, and was under first Ptolemaic in the 3rd century BCE and then Seleucid in the 2nd century BCE rule. And we're inside this tomb, one of hundreds of underground tombs. And we were looking at this back wall on which are those Panathenaic amphoras with their ribbons tied on either side. Eagles balancing on garlands, three-legged tables. The wall here was chopped away by tomb robbers in the later part of the 19th century. So you can just see the top of what was painted here. On both sides, a three-legged table and an incense burner. And the incense burner itself is multi-legged with animal indications. And the table has lion's feet, lion's paws. And the incense burner is on fire. It's alight, and you can see the fire of the incense burner on both sides. A Greek form of furniture, a Greek form of incense burner. The eagle, similar to that on the reverse, the backside of a Ptolemaic coin. The Ptolemies very often had an eagle with outstretched wings. And then over this, the chamber, the right-hand chamber on the back wall, is an inscription. In Greek, as we talked about, you can read the beginning of the first word. What's the beginning of the first word? Apollo, right? And here's what it says. Apolophanes, that's his name. It means may Apollo shine, or something like that. Phaneo is Greek for to shine, I shine, phaneo. So Apollo the shining, or Apollo shines, that's this guy's name. So the guy's name, in addition to the language that he writes, his name is Greek, because he uses a Greek god's name in his name. That's really common. Apolophanes, son of Sesmios. Sesmios, what kind of name is that? Sesmios is a Semitic name, means sesame. Apolophanes, son of Sesmios, who was the leader in Marissa, so in this place, of the Sidonian colony. Who are the Sidonians? Who are they? The Sidonians come from the city of Sidon. The city of Sidon is a Phoenician city on the coast just north of Tyre in modern-day Lebanon. The leader of the Sidonian colony for 33 years was the best and most kin-loving of men, died having lived 74 years. So what are who is Apolophanes? What are his identities? Who would you say he is most like of the people that you have so far met in the Hellenistic world? What do you think? I was pointing to Allison. I'll get you later. Allison, you're not sure? So the guy's got a Greek name. He writes in Greek. What's his ethnic identity? Phoenician. He tells us that his ethnic identity is Phoenician. He's the leader of the Sidonian colony. Why does he need to specify that? Why does he feel that's necessary? Where does he live? How is he wanting to be portrayed as Greek? If he's ethnically Phoenician, so there are a couple questions on the table. Why does it matter to him to specify in this context that he's Phoenician? Yes, it's important to him, but why? And where's Marissa? Not in Phoenicia. It's not in Phoenicia. When do you need to say who you are? When people can't, when you're not among your own. When people can't assume. Then you need to make a point of saying it. So this guy is ethnically Phoenician, and in fact, Dad's got a Semitic name, so he comes by it honestly. And yet, what are all the things that are Greek about this? What are all the things that are Greek? The amphoras. What else? The language. What else? The eagles. What else? Felix, help her out. It's not that big. In fact, there you go. His name. You've got his name. You just got that part. His name, his language, and all of the pictorial signifiers. Those are all Greek. Again, he's not Greek ethnically, but he identifies himself as sufficiently knowledgeable that he might as well be Greek. Except that he just wants you to also know that he's Sidonian. And that's fine. If you had to make a list of all the different things that somebody could say about you, your gender, your class, your political affiliation, etc., there would be a lot. They would all be true. It's not an either-or exercise. You don't have to just be one thing. Now, so this is a long-time family tomb, the Sidonian tomb, and you see all of the receptacles on the sides of the tomb for bodies to go in, and you see that there's painted decoration going along and in between the receptacles. They're called loculi, which is Latin for little place. The loculi are separated by, what are these goofy things painted on the sides in between the loculi? Ionic columns! Isn't that cute? That is darling. That's the word. Those are darling. Absolutely darling. Okay, and then there's this wacky animal frieze across the top. I do not have time to talk about this fascinating frieze to you right now. That's from a different class. They're also, everybody who's buried inside a loculus, that's singular of loculi, gets an inscription. They get their name written. As you can see, they were not the neatest of writers, these folks. And here's what this name says. Kosnatanos, nephew of Sesmios. So he's related to Apollophanes. He's his, I don't know, his cousin or something. So he's the nephew of Sesmios. Kosnatanos, what the heck kind of name is that? Nope. It is a Semitic name. Natan is the Aramaic or Hebrew word for give, to give, and Kos is the name of a deity, just like Apollophanes had the name of a deity in his name. Kos Natanos is Kos gave me, okay? And Kos, K-O-S, is the ancient deity of the people from Edom. Here's Edom. In the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, Edomites moved into this area near the coast of the southern Levant. That's why the region is called Idumea. Idumea is the Hellenized version of the word for Edom. Check out the date at which Edom is a kingdom and Kos is actively worshipped. How long ago is that from the period we're talking about? Do the math. How many centuries? Give me a ballpark. Yeah, yeah, many. About 500 years, 600 years. From the 10th through the 8th centuries BCE, the Edomites were in power down here, and Kos was actively worshipped by them. The tomb is 2nd century BCE. This is the way it is now. There is no Edom. There are no shrines to Kos. And yet, Kos Natanos, buried in that tomb near his uncle Sesmios and his cousin Apollophanes, Kos Natanos is not the only person living in Marissa at this time to adopt that name. This is a fragment of, it's written on pottery, inked on pottery. It's a draft of a marriage contract, 2nd century BCE, 176. Let's see, what's going on in 176 BCE? The Stoa of Attalus is in its planning stages. The great altar has just been built. The Nike of Samothrace has recently been dedicated. And over here in Idumea, 2 fellows, each with the word Kos in the in their name, are making a deal about a marriage. They're making a deal about a marriage in accordance with the customs of the daughters of Edom. The contract here is written in Aramaic. That is the native language of this region. At the exact same time that Apollophanes, writing in Greek, is putting the inscription on this tomb, this marriage contract is written in Aramaic. Why? Because just like you don't have to pick identities, you don't have to pick either or for languages. Both languages are current and in use. And you know what? When you've got 2 languages, both available to choose, then you have to make a decision about which one to choose. And that decision, in and of itself, is a message. So when Apolophanes writes in Greek in that tomb, that's not just because that's the only language known and available. The language itself is part of the message. Now this is something super, super cool. Pay attention here. This Aramaic marriage contract, written ba nomos, according to the nomos of the daughters of Edom, the word nomos, which I have written here in Greek, because the word nomos is Greek. It's a Greek word. There is no word for that word in Aramaic. Because nomos doesn't just mean custom. It means, it has a whole semantic field. It means according to the ideas and the ancestral traditions and the legal regulations, according to what we might say today, the ways. According to the ways. And just as Apolophanes had to, or felt the need to, specify that he was Sidonian because he was living someplace where there were a lot of people who weren't, when this marriage contract was crafted, it was very specifically crafted according to the custom of the daughters of Edom, these ancestral ways. Why didn't there already exist in Aramaic a word for this? Because nobody had ever had to specify it before. Those ways were the ways. But when there's a choice, you have to say. In the 2nd century, in this part of the world, there are way too many choices on the table. Lots of peoples, lots of traditions, lots of languages, lots of cultural ideas. And sometimes what happens in those sorts of situations, so we've seen this nice view at the beginning of the hour, right? We looked at that sheet and we talked about how you could be culturally Greek. And that'd be so cool. You could have the stories, you could have the gods, you could have the language, you could have big images, you could have sculpture, you could have human beings being depicted. You could have this great artistic tradition that you could quote from at will. But not everybody felt like that. You know, isn't that just the way of it? Isn't that just the way of it when there's a lot of choice? Some people get on the bandwagon and some people walk away. So the king at this time, the Seleucid king, is Antiochus IV Epiphanes. And Antiochus IV thought it would be great if everybody, in addition to all of the ways that they already worshipped and all of the things that they already did, also worshipped Greek gods. And he proposed to add into the deity who was being worshipped in the temple that the Judeans had in Jerusalem, he proposed to add Zeus. And that provoked a pretty dramatic reaction among the Judeans, which we know about from the text of the book First Maccabees. Antiochus Epiphanes sent letters to Jerusalem, to the cities of Judah, to prohibit sacrifices and in the sanctuary to build pagan altars and temples and shrines. Of course, this is written from the point of view of somebody who thinks this is terrible, so you have to take that into account. To sacrifice swine and unclean animals, which of course was totally standard practice for Greek sanctuary, so that they might change all their observances, and he appointed inspectors, and many people abandoned the law and committed evil in the land, meaning that many people became culturally Greek. Such as our buddy, Meleager. Remember him? Now, what's the date of Meleager? Yeah. Now, how might you understand Meleager's poem? You want to have a little chat? Okay, that's weird.
No, I was discussing it with somebody for whatever reason. I don't remember what the discussion was about, but I saw it when you put it up. I was like, oh, that's my dream.
So, what do you think? What do you think? Meleager seems proud to be Greek. He certainly does. He seems proud to be Greek, and what's his point? And his point is not let's all be Greek. So how does he say that? Gadara. He isn't from a place that used to be Greek at all. Right. There's no background of being Greek now in this area. In that way, and he's from a zone on the same side of the river as Edom. Edom is down here. Who's he talking to? Who might you imagine Meleager is addressing himself to?
Anybody who's not, born in Greece, kind of any foreigner who's part of the Greek Empire, it seems. Where it seems like the point you're trying to get across is be proud of where you're from, but, I guess.
Because he admits where he's from.
Right.
He says, I'm Syrian, and so what?
So it just seems like he's making that point to everybody. Like, you might be from Marissa. So what? You may be from Delos. Who cares?
Right. Everybody's born somewhere, he says, right? You got to be from somewhere. It's not where you're from. It's what you think. It's how you act. It's what you believe, right? So first he acknowledges where he's from, but he downplays it. He could absolutely be doing that. That's by bragging about the Attic association of Gadara. And he writes in Greek. Meleager's poem is written in Greek, which you should know.
Could he be addressing them both? I mean, I feel in a way he's kind of making educating indigenous Greeks by saying, hey, yeah. Worship gods, that's
Although he doesn't talk, he might mean all of that part,
well,
but
he doesn't say that.
right, he doesn't say that. So I just want to point out, but both of you are so he. I mean, when you write something, probably I suppose that you hope that as many people as possible are going to see it. He can be addressing Greeks, people from Athens or from the native Greek world. He can be addressing people from this area as well. And specifically, what might he be saying, for example, to Kosnatanos, the nephew of Sesmios? What might he be saying to that guy? In one corner, Kosnatanos. In the other, Meleager. They are practically contemporary. I mean, essentially they are contemporary. Kosnatanos dies towards the end of this, in around 130 BCE. Meleager is about 100, just a generation apart. What's Kosnatanos saying by picking that name? That's a wacky name.
He's saying that his roots and his past and his past, just like somebody was like saying that where Meleager is saying that culturally.
Yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Oh man, does this not sound familiar? In one corner, Kosnatanos. Who I am is rooted in antiquity. I am from these ancient people with this deep tradition that is very much not Greek and is very old. Older than the Greeks, as a matter of fact, if you want to know the truth about it. Greeks who think you're so great. And then the other, Meleager of Gadara. Hey, buddy, lighten up. We inhabit a single homeland, the world. All right. Let's move to the middle of the Mediterranean. Italy, also known as West Greece in the Archaic and Classical periods. Greek colonies all throughout southern Italy and Sicily. And various native Italic and Latin groups in the mountainous center of the country, among which were Sabines, Oscans, so all sorts of other cultural groups with their own languages, their own cultural traditions, just the way there were all these other various cultural groups throughout the East that the political scrim of Alexander's conquest covered. These various groups here, the political scrim of Roman conquest covered. But just as the native traditions and identities and to some extent languages and ideals of all of these people didn't evaporate when Alexander the Great came through, or even any of the earlier imperial dominions like the Persians, so too in the Italic Peninsula, all of these various cultural groups continue to exist. In this city, Pompeii, there were two early on cultural or ethnic, whatever you want to call them, groups who lived here. One were Greeks, and the other were Sabines. And it was, in fact, not until 80 BCE, so early in the 1st century BCE, that Pompeii became a Roman colony. It was BCE. It was a large and wealthy and very comfortable town, just no different in that way in terms of the classes and comfort levels and stuff than Delos or many of the other cities and towns and settlements around the Mediterranean world. Like a lot of places with a long history, it has a disorganized little inner core and then a more regular outer core. So there's an old sanctuary of Apollo with a temple and a little area just off of the sanctuary where the streets are oriented to that sanctuary and not much else, and then a regular grid system as the town expanded. Pompeii is mostly houses. Almost 50% of the town is houses, and the houses are very nice and comfortable. You're looking here at an aerial view of the theater quarter. There's the great theater in aerial view and a bit of the small theater coming up the screen, and that would have been the multiplex. So the nicest houses. Many of the nicest houses are nearer to the entertainment facilities, but there's there's houses of all classes throughout the city of Pompeii. We have looked briefly at Hellenistic houses on Delos. The houses in Pompeii are not that type, so they're built up close together like the houses on Delos, but the inner organization of these houses shows us that, like the house at Marissa, these are specific to this cultural group. That is, they might have accoutrements that are Greek, but the house plans and organizations themselves aren't Greek. So the houses, these Italic style houses, have long entryways, and frequently in the entryways there were mosaics. Sometimes the mosaics say things like "welcome," but sometimes they have guard dogs. It's a little xenophobic, and including, just in case you didn't get the idea from the leash and the teeth and the claws, injunction in Latin that says "Beware the dog." Cave canem. In Latin, because that's the language that people spoke here. Unlike the interior light well space of a peristyle courtyard on Delos or an enclosed courtyard at Marissa, Italic houses have this weird setup that has, in the main open hall of the house, a sunken place to collect water called the impluvium, and an open place in the roof for the rain to come in called a compluvium. So this is what it would have been like, you might imagine, in this attractive reconstruction. And you can see through the the main hall of the house into the open gardens beyond. Most of these Italic houses have their own interior shrine, household gods. The household gods were in Latin called the lares, Lares, and so the shrines are called lararia, or the singular lararium. I show you all this quickly just to impress upon you that if you were going to visit, if you were a visitor traveling around the Mediterranean, say you were one of those Italian businessmen on Delos. On Delos, you had a Greek-style house. All the houses on Delos are Greek-style. They're all these courtyard houses. Courtyard houses of the sort that we saw back in January from Zagora. Remember that? So if you were an Italian businessman on Delos and you had cause to travel around the Mediterranean, you would go from your comfortably appointed, very Greek-style, peristyle courtyard house on Delos. You might go visit one of your Phoenician clients, maybe a buddy of the person who lived in the House of the Trident. And you might see a house similar to the one that you went to Marissa. But then if you went, back home to visit mom and dad, say, who live in Pompeii, when you walk in, it would be this style house. It would be a completely different type of house. Okay, these houses have a kind of reception room, public reception room, called a tablinum, and you see one here, and the stars on the plan show you where they exist. If you compare these plans with the Delian houses, you will find none of the elements that I've just pointed out: the impluvium and the tablinum and the long entryways, etc., etc. But they do have mosaic floors that are similar. The wall paintings are similar. And then all of the houses have gardens. A lot, or almost all of the houses have gardens in the backyard. And in the gardens are surrounded by a colonnaded periphery. In other words, a peristyle court. These Pompeian houses in the 2nd century BCE, almost everybody who had a little money made an add-on, made an addition. And the addition they made was a peristyle court. Not as the center organizing principle of the house, the way that they all were on Delos, but as an additional garden space in the back. But that was very chic. It was very chic to be Greek. And inside the peristyle courts, they had sculpture. They had sculpture decorating their courtyards. Like this, for example. This comes from a house in Pompeii. Who's this guy? The Doryphoros. Yeah. Bronze original by Polyclitus, late 5th century BCE. Many marble copies. You could go, you know how you can go today to those little places where you buy garden sculpture and lawn ornaments, and you see a yard and it's filled with all of your choices? Well, you could do that at Pompeii. And you might pick a Doryphoros. Yeah, that might be nice to have. The ideal warrior hero of old, Achilles. Or you might choose instead to have a portrait statue of yourself, like this lady did, Eumachia. She was one of the wealthiest women in Pompeii. In fact, she dedicated a big civic building near the Forum. And she had a life-size marble statue of herself. Who does Eumachia remind you of? We've seen somebody very similar to her. Pink. Lady, monumental, marble, a specific person. Yes, Nicandry. What about this same, more in the time period that we've been talking about? Cleopatra. Right, Cleopatra of Cleopatra and Dioscorides. So what are all the ways that Eumachia is Greek? Quick. Quick. What are all the ways? What's one way? Huh? She's an individual. What's another way? What? Yeah, she's very modestly attired, just like Cleopatra. Or Nicandry, previous to her. What else? So think about it this way. What do Nicandry, Cleopatra, and Eumakia all have in common? What do they all have in common? They're monuments to individual women. What else?
Their life size.
Their life size. What else?
Are these in the public domain? Or are these
They are in the public domain. Well, Cleopatra is in her house. But Nicandry and Eumakia are both in public places. And you could argue that Cleopatra, right off of the peristyle in her house, I mean, that was the public area of her house. You know, you can have a full-length portrait of the matron of the house, and you can put it in the front hallway where anybody who comes in can see it, or you can put it in your back bedroom where only private people see it. So it would depend on where you put it. Cleopatra happened to be in an area of the house that people would have gone into. What else? What are the ways that those three are all the same? An individual person, monumental, in essentially on public view. Let's say it that way. Represent an upper class. They're show-offy, made of marble. They're all made of marble. What do they not? Oh yeah, right.
They're not actually like doing anything or anything.
In and of themselves, they are worthy, right? They are representations simply of themselves, not of themselves in action. How would you say that Eumakia is different than Nicandry and Cleopatra before her? In what way would you distinguish her as different?
Not associated with it.
She is not associated with a man. That is very interestingly true. Anything else? Okay, so is Eumakia Greek sculpture? Yes? Yes? Because I've so far heard essentially nothing that distinguishes her from a Greek sculpture. So all you people who are not raising your hand, tell me why not. I know you sense a trap, and you're worried. And it is a kind of trap, but it's not a trick, exactly. I mean, I've been pretty obvious about it. All right, why is she not a Greek sculpture? I know you don't really mean that. You're just grasping. Because you don't want to say that she's a Greek sculpture, but you can't really think of a reason not to say it. Because you can't say it like that. I mean, Nicandry and Cleopatra don't look anything alike.
She has writing, like saying who she is.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Just like Cleopatra and Nicandry. Another thing in common.
I think she's in that style, but she's still an Italian sculpture made of Italian.
Her name is Latin. I mean, it's written in Latin. Actually, the root of it is Greek. It's written in Latin. Her name is Greek, written in Latin, as a lot of Latin is. So, is that all it takes? where it is? Well, you guys are going to have to do better than that. And that will be the subject of our last class on Tuesday. What makes it Greek? Our last class was Thursday, but our last lecture is Tuesday. Thursday is a discussion day. Okay. Have fun. Don't forget Katie's office hours on Monday if you don't make mine.